morning as we head on into the afternoon. Anyone who uses public transportation has likely heard of this high-profile story involving a Ukrainian refugee who was unfortunately stabbed to death on Charlotte public transportation. It has really gripped the nation because her death was caught on camera. You see the suspect do this horrible act against this young woman who was already trying to flee and save her own life from the violence that's happening in Ukraine. So we are now turning to Butts County Sheriff Gary Long, who has put out this message to anyone who has a gun to use it. And Sheriff Long, before I start to ask you a couple of questions, I want to give people just a little bit of the backstory on this. This woman, Iryna Zarutska, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing her name, was just 23 years old when she was on the Charlotte light rail. And she had moved to Charlotte from Ukraine. She worked several jobs in the US. And unfortunately, her family says she's now going to be buried here because someone who had a long rap sheet killed her for no apparent reason. So good morning to you. Tell us more about why you say gun holders, legal ones, should be prepared.
Thanks for having me. You said it best. It's horrific what happened, and almost 30 years of doing this, I would say that what I watched on that video was more than alarming. There was 5 or 6 other men standing really close in proximity, and nobody did nothing. This could have turned out a lot worse. I mean, there could have been a whole lot more victims, I would say, in this deal. But I think what we're getting to in America, everybody wants to make this about a Republican issue or a Democratic issue, but it's not that. It's a American issue, and it's our communities have become soft targets, and there's not repercussions for what's happening for these violent acts. The fastest way the states across the country like to save money is to put people back out of prison. I'm not saying prison's for everybody, and not everybody should sit in prison forever, but a violent criminal with a violent past that commits violent crimes should stay in prison, period. But I think as sheriff, it's my job to protect and serve. My deputies are going to protect, but just as this incident in Charlotte, North Carolina, there's not an officer on the scene, or there's not an officer assigned to everybody in a community that can't be there. So the first line of defense is that of the public. And it was kind of like a light went off, and it's like we've got to train our people to protect themselves. And that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to run firearms. We've been running citizen firearm courses. I'm going to run them every month as long as I have to run it to do this. And I believe when the violent criminal element realizes that in our county, we're not going to be soft targets. We're going to stand up to them. And it might, unfortunately, in this case, I hear this a lot. People will call me and say, well, Sheriff, I don't really think this could have been stopped. No, I don't either. It was so fast, so rapid, and so instant. There was no aid rendered immediately that could have possibly saved their life. So I'm also teaching the Stop the Bleed class to the public. But it's one of those things. What would have happened if somebody would have stepped up and intervened? Thank God we didn't have 5, 6, 7, 10, 12 people stabbed because nobody's doing nothing. And it's just tragic. And 30 years of doing this, probably one of the worst senseless crimes that I've physically seen on a video.
Yeah,
It's just
and we're showing some of that video right now while being respectful, of course, because the whole thing was caught on camera. So we are stopping it before any actual violence. Of course, we know the terrible fate that this 23-year-old ended up in, but we're also showing images of the suspect, Decarlos Brown Jr. I want to point out that Charlotte's mayor is blaming this on the court system, saying that had it done its job, this suspect wouldn't have been out there on the train, wouldn't have been out there on the streets, wouldn't have had access to anyone, let alone someone who was already trying to protect themselves, trying to start a new life. So can you speak to how the court system, with just a few seconds left here, plays a role in this?
No, I think we see all too often. We're a little different. We're outside of the metro area, kind of a rural county. But what I see across the country is judges bring this up. There, you have RICO charges that there was probable cause that the warrant's done. Just the case you talked to a minute ago, and a judge has just dismissed all the RICO charges. We see this all the time, and I think it comes down to the people of this country need to elect judges that's going to do the right thing and hold violent criminals where they need to be, and that's not on the streets, that's in jail. So I'm going to agree with the mayor of Charlotte completely, and I think that's one step. That's one step of the problem is the court system. The other problem is we've become a society that it's like we don't want to get involved in that, and it's not our business. But as sheriff, I am going to work tooth and nail day in and day out to make this community a known community that we're going to protect our people, not just law enforcement. The people are going to protect the people. But yes, I agree with the mayor of Charlotte 100%, and that's where it all starts is in that in the justice system and in the courtrooms.
I want to point out your own words. You know, you tweeted about this. That's how we got you on the line and on our air and streaming with us. Can you tell us a little bit about what you said on social media? We have an image of it for those of you who want to take a look.
You know, it's a very emotional video to watch, and doing this so long, and it's sickening. And I just, I'm a firm believer. It's common sense sometimes not doesn't seem to be so common. But here's what I know. I have 30 years of doing this. An armed community is a safe community. Period. An armed community is a safe community. Uh, and it's just it deeply bothered me to see nobody intervene, and it bothers me that look, I'm not saying it would have saved her life. I've talked to paramedics, I've talked to nurses this morning, I talked to one doctor, and I said, look, could her life had been saved if aid was rendered immediately? And they said, well, the chances are there, not 100%. I'm not a paramedic, I'm not a doctor nor a nurse, so I was asking people, and it could have been, but it was just alarming. So I wanted to put that out there, but I want to put out to the public that we don't have to be soft targets. We don't have to be soft targets. And here I had one comment on that post. They said, "Well, Daniel Penny in New York got arrested. He was had to go to trial on this." Well, I can assure you this as sheriff of this county. I can't speak for Fulton, Clayton, DeKalb. I can't speak any county in the state, but I can speak for this county. If somebody defends themselves or a third person from a violent attack, if they went to jail, I'm going to jail with them. Period. Bottom line, I'm going to jail with them because they have a right to defend themselves. Even though this guy is walking off that train, has a knife in his hand, if somebody said, well, you can't have a gun on transit in Charlotte. I understand that. But if somebody would have pulled out a knife and stabbed him in the back and killed him, it's justified. He showed a propensity for violence. He just stabbed this lady, and he could have stabbed 10 other people along the way. So it's one of those things leaders in law enforcement need to train the community. Like a lot of the community doesn't know these things. I learned this through the classes we teach. And it's our responsibility, I feel, as the sheriff elected in this county to educate my public on how they can defend themselves. And that's what we're going to do.
Right. One of the producers just told me that Charlotte lawmakers are right now discussing this, as they should be. It's such a high profile situation and such a heartbreaking one that you would imagine that they are trying to figure out a resolve here. And it might not be apparent. But I also want to point out our commander in chief, the president himself, and I'm looking at my notes here, has called for the death penalty for this suspect in this Charlotte light rail stabbing. If you look at this image on your screen right now, it says criminals like this, according to the president, need to be locked up. And he puts that in all caps. He goes on to say, and now her blood is on the hands of Democrats who refuse to put bad people in jail. And I also want to point out here that Charlotte's mayor has still secured a Democratic nomination, despite how political this has become, this awful tragedy. Um, if you could, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that Atlanta has public transportation. We are often concerned about safety on MARTA. I myself was at a MARTA station after a Beyonce concert. And while I'm very grateful that everyone was okay, there was a bit of an escalator malfunction. People are constantly concerned about safety in these regards. So, as I recognize you were the sheriff of Butts County, which is a little bit further out from the hustle and bustle of Metro Atlanta, but if you could just give us your 2 cents on how we could make public transportation a bit safer here. I recognize your light just went out, but there
It's
we
an
go. We're back.
automatic thing. I think unfortunately, when someone of a violent nature is going to commit a crime, it's hard to stop. It is hard to stop, but I think the big thing and not all situations, just as her, she was coming from work, but it's always safer on public transportation or going to a concert or going to a venue or anywhere to go in pairs. Of course, that's very important. But you got to be observant. The days of us sitting around thinking that nobody will do this or this can't happen here. We're in a rural county. We touch Metro Atlanta, but it can happen here today. So you've got to be observant. You got to pay attention to your surroundings, and if it doesn't seem right, it's probably not right. But it's a everyday challenge that's got to be addressed. It's always every time we have an issue, it's always there's a shooter and we got to have more gun control. Well, this shows you clearly. You hear nothing about knife control, but it doesn't take a gun to kill it. Guns aren't killing people. People are killing people, and it's a problem that here's what I would say. We've got to put away the Republicans. We have to put away the Democrats. This is not a party problem. This is a people problem. And us as Americans need to come together. The leaders of this state and of this country need to come together and come up with the plan, which can be done. I'm not going to say to ever prevent this, but we can minimize the risk to the that's
The
using
amount of
these
times it happened.
transit systems.
Of course. Of course, this is a touchy subject because we know people say that phrase, guns don't kill people kill people. And then the conversation becomes, how do you make sure the right people are arming themselves? We don't have any more time, unfortunately. It has been great having you. We really do appreciate you taking time to speak with us here on Fox Local.
Well,
Maybe
thank
we'll
you for
touch
having
base
me.
again. Yes, of course. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, we will